A racist, a bigot, and a misogynist. Those are just some of the explosive claims made against President Trump by his longtime associate and former White House advisor, Omarosa Manigault Newman, in her new book, Unhinged. Her relationship with the president.
Five children. 20 miles from Selma, several shots were fired. The driverless car veered off the highway and came to a stop at a cattle fence. Mrs. Liuzzo was dead. Arrested and charged with murder were 3 alleged members of the Ku Klux Klan. One was tried, and the jury was unable to reach a verdict. This is an earthen dam, the temporary grave of 3 civil rights workers, 2 white, 1 Negro, Mickey Schwerner, Andrew Goodman, and James Chaney, beaten and shot to death. Among those indicted for this triple slaying were 6 men identified as members of the Ku Klux Klan. None has been brought to trial. In this automobile, Reserve Lieutenant Colonel Lemuel Penn was killed by a shotgun blast while riding through Colbert, Georgia. Arrested for this crime were 4 Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. 2 Klansmen were tried and acquitted. In a few short months, 5 murders, 13 alleged members of the Ku Klux Klan said to be involved in the killings.
When such an order is this moves in and takes over the police power, you are completely at their mercy. And their atrocities and their violence can be visited on anybody that disagrees with them in any given situation.
What started as a joke 100 years ago, when a group of men donned bedsheets for a romp, has over the years attracted to it persons charged with acts of harassment, intimidation, and violence throughout the South. Even though the nation has been outraged for many years, the Ku Klux Klan persists with its bizarre ritual and trappings. But 100 years is a long time for a joke.
CBS Reports presents the Ku Klux Klan, the Invisible Empire. Here is CBS News correspondent Charles Kuralt.
He said, I think Donald Trump is an artful liar. I think he is a greedy, vicious, and arrogant man.
Well, I don't know, is that supposed to be a compliment or not? I'm not sure.
He waged a years-long battle with New York City Mayor Ed Koch.
I hope that New York City has a different mayor at some point, because I think Ed Koch is a total disaster. He's been a very bad mayor for the city.
He helped launch a competitor to the NFL called the U.S. Football League, and then launched a lawsuit against the NFL when the USFL failed.
The jury in the case delivered its verdict. It ruled the NFL did indeed monopolize pro football, but it awarded damages of just $1.
And in one of his biggest fights of the 1980s, he went up against media mogul Merv Griffin in a fight over a casino in Atlantic City.
People realize now that Merv made a bad deal. It's unfortunate that he's taken a fall, but he has taken the fall. Nothing much I can do about it.
Donald Love.
All through the 1980s, Trump was busy building something new, and it wasn't a skyscraper.
Billionaire developer Donald Trump has put his name on a New York City hotel, shopping center, and apartment buildings, as well as a casino in Atlantic City. And now he's going to put his...
Donald loves that perception. I won. He is still, a year later standing in New York going, I won. He wants to make sure everybody in America knows he won.
But the Donald Trump we know today is more than just a boastful brawler. That's because there's one more tactic that Trump apparently learned in the 80s and uses to great effect on the campaign trail today. Keep people guessing about any long-term plans.
Mr. Trump, what's left in your life? You're 33 years old, you're worth all this money. You say you didn't say that you want to be worth $1 billion.
No, I really don't. I just want to keep busy and keep active.
Could $1 billion buy the White House? What do you think?
Well,
Does
I don't
money
think it
give you...
can. I know a lot of the politicians. I like a lot of the politicians. They're friends of mine.
Trump carefully cultivated speculation about his future. In 1987, he ran...
This is not a wealthy country. People think America, you know, wealth, this and that. The Japanese are saying that. What a wealthy country. I mean, they're saying it and they're laughing. The country's losing $200 billion a year. We ought to go in, the next time they fire so much as a bullet at one of our ships, we ought to go in and take over their oil.
Before he was a presidential candidate,
And I've been saying for years, keep the oil, don't let them have the oil.
before he was a reality TV star,
You're fired.
Donald Trump was a New York tabloid fixture.
The Ku Klux Klan as a secret organization has been allowed to exist in this country. Virtually every president of the United States in the past century has said the Klan has little regard for constituted authority. President Johnson, following the murder of Mrs. Liuzzo in Alabama, defined the Ku Klux Klan as a hooded society of bigots and warned Klansmen to get out of the Klan and return to a decent before it is too late. It is Sunday, the morning after a Ku Klux Klan meeting in Durham, North Carolina. These men are members of the United Klans of America, Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, one of the most exclusive organizations in America. It excludes many Protestants, all Roman Catholics, Jews, Negroes, Spanish Americans, Puerto Ricans, and anyone else who, according to the Ku Klux Klan, is not 100% pure American.
In 1987, he ran a full-page ad in major newspapers that read like a political manifesto.
A blow-up of the ad is now on display at Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue.
The ad was irresistible to the New York press, and the move kept Trump's name in the news.
Trump has said, quite seriously, that he's a good enough bargainer to negotiate a nuclear disarmament treaty with the Russians.
This is not a wealthy country.
With each of these instances, Trump refined his playbook. His attacks,
Steve, you're going to have to start pushing these people now a little bit, because it's getting a little ridiculous as far as I'm concerned.
his boasts,
We'll probably sell an extra 10,000 season tickets, and that's a lot of tickets.
and his shifting positions.
Do you have the genes to be a successful politician?
Well, you never really know. I think I'm pretty outspoken, and that's not probably a good thing in terms of a politician, but it's a good thing if you ever got elected, you could really do a job.
Now, even back in the 80s, many found Trump's over-the-top personality distasteful.
What may be most discouraging of all is that Palm Beach will accept almost anything if it's got enough money, but somehow it will not accept Donald Trump.
But by playing the role of an unpredictable bully with the Midas touch, Trump showed he couldn't easily be ignored.
I believe that perhaps I'm portrayed differently than I actually am. I believe I'm portrayed in a rougher sense than the actual product. And I hope that's true, because I hope the actual product is a lot more mellow than the portrayal.
And that may be his biggest asset of all. When people attack Trump, they reinforce the version of Trump that Trump wants people to see. And inevitably, that keeps Trump's name in the news.
That doesn't matter because I'm not running for office.
Director John Brennan tweeted to the president, "It's astounding how often you fail to live up to minimum standards of decency, civility, and probity. Seems like you will never understand what it means to be president, nor what it takes to be a good, decent, and honest person. So disheartening, so dangerous for our nation." Joining us now, former CIA Director John Brennan. He is our senior national security and intelligence analyst for MSNBC and NBC News. Director Brennan, the last part of your tweet really captured my attention, saying that it's so dangerous for our nation. In what ways?
Well, good evening, Lawrence, and thank you for having me on. Well, I think in two principal ways. First, I think Donald Trump has badly sullied the reputation of the office of the presidency with his invective, with his constant disregard, I think, for human decency, as well as his befriending of autocratic leaders around the world, and his continued pursuit of relationships to benefit himself as opposed to the country. I do think that America's standing in the world has also been tarnished. But I think even more fundamentally, what he is doing here in the United States is very polarizing, and he is, I think, the most divisive president we've ever had in the Oval Office. He is feeding and fueling hatred and animosity and misunderstandings among Americans. And so I am very concerned when I look at some of the tweets that are out there and commentary. We are just fighting with each other as a nation. And this is something that the President of the United States traditionally has been the one to try to heal these domestic wounds, these domestic problems. But I think Donald Trump has failed repeatedly to try to do that. He continues just to play to his base of support and feeds them, basically with raw meat, a lot of this language that tends to get them riled up. That is not something that is in our nation's security.
I want to draw on your experience.
Now he's going to put his name on a big piece of Eastern Airlines.
Trump was creating a public persona, one that could be both funny and demeaning, arrogant and somehow in touch with the common man.
I sort of love and hate him.
I don't hate niggers, man. I don't associate with niggers. On the other hand, I don't associate with common white trash or Jews or Catholics, if I can help it.
Right. This is the Grand Dragon of the North Carolina realm of the United Clans, J. Robert Jones, former sailor, bricklayer, lightning rod salesman. He now reportedly rules over more than 50 claverns, or chapters, and their 7,000 dues-paying members.
I think the nigger has rights in this country. He should have equal rights, but separate rights. It's worked for 100 years in the South, and I think it will work now. But if you was the nicest fella in the world and Lyndon Johnson said I had to associate with you every day, I'd tell Lyndon Johnson to go straight to hell because I would not associate with you.
This is the Grand Consul, the late Matt Murphy, who until his recent death was Chief Legal Counsel of the United Clans. His favorite targets were the Negroes, Jews, the Federalism, and international bankers.
I had made speeches before the United Clans of America, and they were the only organization that ever went on record after I had talked for 2 solid hours on the viciousness of the Federal Reserve Corporation and how it has bilked the taxpayers and American citizens out of all the money, and that Great Britain has removed the bank from the international bankers, and their bank is back under the crown.
Is Nighthawk? This is a Nighthawk of the United Clans in North Carolina. A Nighthawk is responsible for the security of a clavern.
Why did you join the Clans? Well, I've got a wife, 5 kids. I think that's enough reason. I want them to have a country to be raised up in like I was. I wasn't forced to go to school with niggers. I wasn't forced to eat with them. And I want them to have at least the right that I had.
It's a disarmament act.
This is Mr. Outlaw. Wherever Jones goes, Mr. Outlaw, the Grand Clexter or guard, is at his side. In the group are the 3 defendants indicted for the killing of Mrs. Liuzzo: Eugene Thomas, William Eaton, and Cully Leroy Wilkins.
Congress has allowed its authority over this very important issue of war-making to ebb. It is time for us to reassert that authority and to start asking some very tough questions about the wars, and I use the word wars, W-A-R-S, that we are currently in. Now, some people may think that this is an interesting, abstract discussion. We have brilliant constitutional scholars, wonderful intellectual debate. But let me assure every person here that the abdication of Congress to its responsibilities over war has had incredibly dire and horrific consequences for the people of our country and, in fact, the world. So I want to bring this down to earth and away from an abstract, although enormously important constitutional discussion. I want to give you 3 examples in recent American history where Congress did not ask the right questions, abdicated its responsibility, and the consequences were enormous. Very few Americans know that when we deal with Iran, very much in the news right now, how many people know that in 1953, the United States, along with the British, overthrew the democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh, reinstalling authoritarian rule under the Shah. In 1979, the Shah was overthrown in the Iranian Revolution, bringing to power an extremist anti-American government. In 1953, the United States government, without congressional approval, thought that it could simply remove the government of Iran in order to protect wealthy oil interests. And what has been the consequences of that over the years? Congress abdicated its responsibility. And the second one, more relevant to my generation, was the war in Vietnam. In 1964, now Iran took place under Eisenhower, Republican. In 1964, Lyndon Johnson, Democrat, otherwise, in my view, a very great president. But in this instance, cited an attack on a U.S. ship in the Gulf of Tonkin as a pretext for escalating the U.S. intervention in Vietnam. But we now know from his own recordings that Johnson himself doubted that story about that attack. Johnson's administration misled both Congress and the American people into a war that resulted in the loss of over 50,000 American soldiers and over 1 million Vietnamese. Congress was lied to. There was no serious debate about American intervention in that war. Third example, more recently, that we all remember was Iraq. Today, it is now broadly acknowledged that the Iraq War was a foreign policy blunder of enormous magnitude. In this case, the Bush administration lied to the American people, claiming that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. The result of that war, the loss of thousands of brave American soldiers, the displacement of millions of people in the Middle East, and bringing us to where we are right now. In other words,
any way the president looks, he can see legal threats closing in around him. There's the Russia connection. Long a favourite of the president's liberal foes is the idea that he knowingly colluded with the Russians, joining forces against Hillary Clinton.
There was no collusion at all. I didn't know the president. There was nobody to collude with.
Just this week, the president changed course over a key 2016 meeting between his son and a Russian lawyer. Having previously said it was about adoption policy, on Sunday he admitted it was a meeting to get information on an opponent, totally legal and done all the time in politics, but that he hadn't known about it. And indeed that hints at the difficulties